Following morning arrived beneath clear skies, for once. No war alerts, no assassination reports, no emergency council meetings, just sunrise. The transport rested upon the Academy launch platform overlooking the oceans of Reach, while crews completed final preparations for departure. Below the cliffs, the world Kenny had built continued waking. Cities came alive, transit systems lit up, fishing vessels departed harbors, Academy students filled training grounds, and for a brief moment, everything felt normal. Pines stepped onto the transport carrying far too much luggage. Lyra immediately noticed. "What is all that?" Pines looked offended. "Essentials. You packed 6 bags." Again, Pines pointed dramatically. "Essentials." Kenny walked straight past both of them. Lyra looked toward him. "Can you tell him he's insane?" "No, why not?" "Because he'll just explain it." Pines nodded proudly. "Exactly." The transport ramp closed behind them. Moments later, the engines ignited. Blue light flooded the launch platform. The ship slowly rose from the cliffs before accelerating upward through the clouds. Reach disappeared beneath them. Then the atmosphere vanished, and the stars returned. The three sat together inside the observation lounge while the transport moved through established jump corridors toward Tyrannus territory. The room was quiet, comfortable. Not the silence of strangers. The silence of people who no longer needed constant conversation. Outside the viewing glass, Reach slowly shrank into a glowing blue-green jewel hanging among the stars. Pines stared out the window. "Still weird. What is?" "That's ours." Kenny glanced toward the planet. "Not mine. Ours." The correction remained unspoken, but all three knew it. The ship entered a jump lane shortly afterward. Stars stretched, reality distorted. Then suddenly, they were elsewhere. The first planet they passed belonged to one of the Imperial trade systems. A massive gas giant dominated the viewing windows. Bands of gold and silver clouds stretched across its surface while 6 moons orbited around it. Pines whistled. "Imagine living there." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "On the gas giant? No." Pines pointed toward one of the moons. The moon looked almost entirely covered by cities. Light stretched across the surface in every direction. "There." Kenny looked out thoughtfully. "Population?" Lyra checked her datapad. 22 billion. Pines blinked. 22 billion people on a moon. Silence. The scale was difficult to comprehend. The transport continued onward. Hours passed. They crossed several systems, some beautiful, some harsh. One world appeared entirely covered in crimson forests. Another consisted mostly of endless oceans broken only by floating city platforms. Eventually, conversation shifted naturally toward their destination. Lyra activated a file on her datapad. "I did some research." Pines immediately pointed. "Of course you did." Lyra ignored him. "The Queen's name is Queen Selene Arcturus." A holographic image appeared above the table. The woman from the call. Elegant, confident, dangerously intelligent-looking. Kenny watched quietly. Lyra continued. "House Arcturus." The family crest appeared. A silver crown surrounded by 7 stars. Pines leaned forward. "Fancy. They're old." Lyra zoomed through several historical records, not as old as House Rain. Another pause, but close. The transport hummed softly around them. "What are they known for?" Kenny asked. Lyra nodded. 3 things. Another file appeared. Diplomacy. A second. Education. A third. And public service. Pines looked surprised. "That's boring." Lyra rolled her eyes. "No." She pointed toward the records. "It's actually impressive." The information continued scrolling. Unlike many noble houses, House Arcturus apparently required all members to spend years working directly among the public. Schools, hospitals, infrastructure, community service. Pines frowned. "Wait." Another pause. "They actually work?" Lyra nodded. "Apparently." Kenny remained thoughtful. "Interesting. Very different from House Rain." The transport continued through another jump gate. Outside the viewing windows, a ringed planet drifted into view. Massive, beautiful. Its rings stretched thousands of kilometers through space like silver rivers. The sight temporarily silenced everyone. Then eventually Pines spoke. "So," he looked toward Kenny, "what happens after the war?" Silence settled. A different kind this time. More serious. Kenny looked out toward the stars. "I don't know." Pines blinked. "That's a first." Kenny ignored him. The floating daggers continued their lazy rotation beside his seat. Eventually, Lyra spoke quietly. "You do know." Another pause. "You just haven't said it." Kenny remained silent for several moments, then finally answered. "I don't want House Rain." Pines nodded. "Obviously, I don't want their planets." Another pause. "I don't want their power." Lyra watched him carefully. The transport hummed softly around them. Kenny looked out toward the stars again. "What I want, silence. Is for nobody to fear them anymore." The room grew quiet, because that sounded exactly like him. Not revenge, freedom, the thing that made Kenny different from his father. Pines leaned back slowly. "So you're not trying to replace them?" "No." Kenny shook his head. "I want the cycle to stop." The former Eclipse survivor looked thoughtful. For once, no jokes, no smart comments, just understanding. Eventually he nodded. "Good." Lyra smiled faintly. Agreed. The conversation drifted again after that. Stories, memories, travel, life. Then unexpectedly Kenny looked toward both of them and spoke quietly. "Thank you." The room went silent. Pines blinked. "What?" Kenny folded his arms. "For staying." Neither answered immediately. The stars drifted slowly outside the viewing glass. Kenny continued. "You could have left after Eclipse." Another pause. "Most people would have." The transport remained quiet. "I know the war isn't your responsibility." Another pause. "But you're both still here." Lyra looked down briefly. Pines scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. The man who could talk endlessly suddenly seemed unsure what to say. Finally he shrugged. "Well?" Another pause. "You're my idiot?" Lyra laughed. Kenny raised an eyebrow. Pines pointed dramatically. "You don't get to judge the wording." The tension broke instantly. Lyra shook her head, then looked toward Kenny. "I stayed because I wanted to. Simple, honest, the best kind of answer." For several moments nobody spoke. 3 survivors, 3 friends, people who had started together inside the Eclipse games, people who somehow became family. Eventually Pines stood dramatically. "Right." He pointed toward both of them. "Before this gets emotional, I'm getting food." Lyra immediately laughed, and even Kenny smiled slightly. The rest of the trip passed quickly. Several hours later, alarms chimed softly throughout the transport. Arrival notification. The crew began preparing descent procedures. Everyone moved toward the observation deck. And there it was, Tyrannus Prime, the homeworld of House Arcturus. Beautiful. The planet shimmered with deep sapphire oceans and brilliant white continents. Massive cities sparkled beneath the atmosphere while enormous floating structures drifted through the skies. Even from orbit it looked wealthy, refined, civilized. The transport descended slowly. The closer they got, the more obvious it became. People knew they were coming. Crowds filled landing districts, news drones filled the air, banners waved from nearby buildings. Pines stared through the window. "Oh no, what? We're famous here too." Lyra groaned. The transport landed, the ramp lowered, and immediately the cheering started. Kenny stepped outside first. The crowd erupted. Pines followed. More cheering. Then Lyra appeared. Several young girls practically lost their minds. One little girl immediately ran forward before security could stop her. She couldn't have been older than 10. The girl looked up toward Lyra nervously. "Miss Lyra?" Lyra blinked. The little girl held out a datapad. "Can I have a photo?" The crowd immediately went silent, waiting. Lyra smiled. A real smile. Of course. The little girl's face lit up instantly. Moments later, they took a photo together. Then another. Then Lyra signed the datapad. The girl practically floated back toward her family afterward. Pines looked amused. "You have fans?" Lyra pointed toward him. "Don't. It's adorable. Don't." The escort team eventually guided them away from the crowds and into the city. The journey toward the royal district took nearly an hour. The entire route showcased the wealth of Tyrannus Prime. Beautiful architecture, gardens, waterways, parks, public art. Everywhere they looked, people smiled and waved. Eventually, the transport arrived at the royal complex. Massive white towers stretched toward the sky. Silver banners moved gently in the wind. The escort led them through enormous halls before finally stopping before a set of towering doors. The doors opened slowly, and there, waiting beneath the crest of House Arcturus, stood Queen Selene herself.